Okay, thank you for bearing with us. So today, we're going to continue this series on spiritual disciplines, okay? It's from this book called The Celebration of Discipline, The Path to Spiritual Growth. Can you say those words? Discipline of service, okay? That's what I'm going to talk about today, discipline of service, okay? But before I dive into the talk, let me start with a story, okay? And don't crucify me because of this story, okay? It's a story of a guy who noticed that there was something wrong going on in his body. And so he was losing weight without even trying. And so he went to his doctor. And his doctor, of course, referred him to a specialist. Okay? And the specialist ordered him to take all sorts of tests. And after a week, the results came up. Okay? And they came up with a diagnosis. And it was serious, actually. So they called him and his wife to the hospital. And when they got to the hospital, the doctor tells the guy, could you please wait outside? I want to talk to your wife first, okay? And so the guy goes out, goes to the waiting room, and nervously waiting for his wife. Anyway, the doctor then talks to the wife, and he says to his wife, to the wife of the guy, he says, I'm sad to tell you, but your husband has a very rare disease, he says, okay? And if he's left untreated, he may die, okay? He may die. But the doctor said, but there's good news, okay? With chemo and the help from you, actually, we believe that he can be healed, okay? He can be healed. But the challenge is this, he says to the wife, okay? He will need to have a very strict diet. And therefore, that means you have to prepare his every meal, okay? To make sure that he sticks to his diet. Second, he has to live in a very clean environment. He has to live in a very clean environment, so you have to make sure that you keep cleaning after him, okay? You have to clean everything up. And that means you have to also be available to him every day, okay? Every day you have to be available to clean up after him. And the doctor finally says, and to be honest with you, it will require a lot more from you than you could ever imagine, okay? But, he says, if you prepare his meals, and if you clean up after him, okay, and serve him, and do this over a period of time, we don't know how long, he says, but over a period of time, your husband will live and will get well, okay? So the wife walks out of the doctor's office, okay? And of course, her husband is now very, very nervous. And so he says to his wife, so what did the doctor say, okay? What did the doctor say? Some of you are already laughing because I think you know what she's about to say. So the wife said to her husband, well, the doctor has bad news for you, okay? He said that you're going to die, okay? And so the guy said, why? Why am I going to die? And that's because I'm not doing that, okay? I'm not doing that. That's my next slide. I am not doing that, okay? I'm not going to do that, okay? I'm not going to do what he wants me to do. It's too hard. I don't have the time to do that, okay? And it's too difficult to do that, so I won't do it. Now, some people find this story funny, okay? But it brings home a point that a lot of times in our life, okay, we find ourselves in a situation where we are asked to serve, okay? And yet we tell ourselves, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Let someone else do it, okay? Isn't it? We jump right away and you say, pass it on to someone else, not me, okay? And I'm gonna be honest with you that I'm guilty of it too, okay? That sometimes I can have this attitude about serving. And I'll say to myself, I don't want to do that, okay? It's too hard. And I think of this is the next thing you do. After you think to yourself, I'm not gonna do that, you come up with excuses, okay? Familiar? You come up with excuses. So excuses for me range from, I'm too old for that, okay? Or I don't have time for that. Or I have other things to do as well. Okay? Can you tap the person beside you and tell them, I'm not doing that? Yeah, I have asked you to do that, okay? Because in most of my talks, I would say that, okay? Tap someone's shoulder. But this is one thing I find that maybe in a bigger group, actually, because we're a smaller group, but in a bigger group, a lot of people won't tap the person's shoulder beside them, okay? Why? Because I'm not doing that, okay? I'm not doing that. That's foolish. That's crazy, okay? I'm not touching my neighbor. I'm not doing that, okay? It's stupid in a way, you say to yourself, okay? But you see, here's the thing. If we want to follow Jesus, okay, and be like Jesus, then we need to serve like Jesus. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but you need to serve like Jesus. That's the way you follow Jesus, okay? You follow Jesus. You serve the poor. Jesus served the poor, the hungry, the sick, okay? Because he came to serve and not be served. That's what he said, okay? I came to serve and not be served. And therefore, if we want to be like Jesus, then we need to serve like Jesus, right? And not only serve, because we can easily say, okay, I'm going to serve someone with a heaviness inside of us, okay? But I believe that Jesus challenges you today to serve with radical love, okay? With radical love. Because let's be honest, it's hard to serve others, okay? It's hard to serve others. And the only way we can really love and serve others unconditionally is when we have radical love. When we love with radical love, okay? In this book, Celebration of Discipline, Richard Foster, the author, says, as the cross is a sign of submission, the towel is the sign of service. Okay? He's obviously referring to John's Gospel, where we find the story of Jesus, okay, where Jesus paints a picture of service to his disciples by what he did after the Last Supper, at the end of the Last Supper. Okay? It's a picture of the kind of service I believe that he wants us, okay, his disciples, to learn, and he wants each one of us to learn. Let's just read how the story begins, okay? It begins by saying this: it was just before Passover festival, and Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. So picture this in your mind, okay? Picture Jesus in your mind. Jesus knew that this was the day before his crucifixion. This is now the day before his crucifixion. And the text goes on to say, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them till the end. Okay? He loved them till the end. What did he do? He loved them till the end. So it's not only, Jesus is not only painting, the author John is saying to us that not only was he painting a picture of serving others, but he's also painting the love of Jesus, the radical love of Jesus, that at the very end, he's about to be crucified. He doesn't think of himself, he thinks of others. He thinks of others. A radical love that Jesus shows each one of us. Because many times to serve others, the reality is we need radical love. We need radical love. Then verse 2 and 3 of John 13 goes on to say, the evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. Let's unpack this, okay? And get this in our minds on what is going on, okay? You see, Jesus is about to give his life, okay? It's the day before his crucifixion. And if you read before this, you could just imagine what he's going through. You could just imagine what he's going through because he's had an incredibly difficult week, okay? On the Monday of that week, he cleansed the temple, okay? He cleansed the temple. He went in, turned all the tables, and then he says, you will not turn my Father's house into a place of profit. This will be a house of worship. And so you could just imagine a lot of people were hating him. All the sellers were hating him at that point. Then on Tuesday, the following day, he has this massive argument with the religious leaders. On Wednesday, he doesn't say anything, and maybe I'm thinking that's when he started to pray, Lord, it's coming. Father, it's coming, it's coming. And so he's praying for the strength to be able to go through what he's about to go through. And now, the scene that we're talking about is a Thursday evening, okay? It's a Thursday evening. He's gathered all of his closest friends in a secret room, and he's ready to give his final speech, okay? To share with them, and to share with them his body and blood, okay? The bread and the wine in that historic moment. He knows that one of his disciples, this is a funny thing, he even knows that one of his disciples is going to betray him. He knows that the very next day he's going to be beaten, betrayed, tortured, abandoned, okay, and then hung on a cross to die. But what does he do? Okay, what does he do? The next verse of John's Gospel says, he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. Now, in John's Gospel, it doesn't tell us why Jesus is doing this. Okay? Sorry. And that's why we need to jump to Luke's Gospel, because we find the reason in Luke's Gospel, okay? Because that's where it tells us why Jesus did what he did, okay? Why he got the towel and stood up, okay? It says in Luke's Gospel, they began to argue among themselves. So right after the Last Supper, okay, the disciples are starting to argue. They began to argue among themselves about who would be the greatest among them. So it's because an argument broke out among his disciples, okay? Or in other words, they were acting like 2-year-old kids, okay? Starting to talk about who's the greatest, okay? Who's the best, who ranks the highest, okay? Who's the favorite, who's the best of the best, okay? Now, we don't know what happened exactly, but I can just imagine at times, when I read the Bible, at times I just try and imagine, put myself in that situation, and I could just imagine that John must have said, well, hold on guys, I must be the greatest, okay? I must be the greatest because I'm the loved, the one he loved. Remember? I'm the beloved. I'm the beloved. So I'm the greatest because I'm the beloved. But then Peter must have heard John and says to everyone, he speaks up and says, hold on guys, don't you remember I walked on water? Okay? Where were you? You were all sitting in the boat. Okay? None of you stood up. And then someone says, yeah, Peter, and you sank. You did not get to him. Okay? He had to rescue you at the end of the day. And then I imagine Bartholomew, because of his name is so long, okay? He speaks up and says, what about me? Maybe I'm the greatest, okay? But everyone says, so long, Bartholomew, we don't think you're the greatest. Your name is too long. No one will remember your name, okay? So there's this dispute that's going on, okay, about who's the greatest among them. And you could just imagine again, look at Jesus again. You can just imagine him thinking to himself, I can't believe this, okay, I can't believe this. I already told them, okay, I already told them who's the greatest, okay? And he probably would have said to them, hey guys, don't you remember Matthew's gospel? In Matthew's gospel, I told you that the greatest among you is the one who will be your servant. The answer is there already. I've already told you, okay? So, because Jesus already told them earlier, I did not come to be served by others. I came to serve you, to lay down my life as a ransom for many. So I guess in his frustration, okay, he looks around the room, okay? He looks around the room. These guys are arguing about who's the greatest. And so he looks around the room and he thinks to himself, how can I bring the point to them? Okay? How can it make an impact on them? And so what he sees, of course, is the proud hearts arguing with each other and dirty feet. He sees dirty feet, okay? Richard Foster in the book says the disciples must have been aware that someone needed to wash the other's feet. Okay? Because this was the custom. This was the custom. The problem was that people who washed feet were the least. Okay? Were the least. Because it was the job of a slave. It was the job of a slave. And no one in the group wanted to be the least. Okay? No one wanted to be seen as the slave. So Jesus must have thought to himself, how can I show them who the greatest is? I'm going to wash their feet. So what does he do? It says, so Jesus got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped the towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin, and he began to wash the disciples' feet. What did he do? He began to do what? He began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. Why did he wash their feet? Because in the time of Jesus, this was the job of a slave. And he wanted to show them, if you really want to be a servant, okay, sometimes you need to do those things, okay, that are difficult, very difficult. Radical love. Remember radical love? If you came into a Jewish home at the time of Jesus, the first thing the host would do, of course, is to plant a kiss on your cheek. And then the next thing he would say is, come, we will have your feet washed. But the thing is that it's not the host who's going to wash the feet of that person who's come in as a visitor, okay, as a guest. It's the slave of the master, okay? So it's never that. But in this story, in what Jesus did, he does the work of the slave. He does the work of the slave, okay? Then to drive home the message, Jesus says, now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Richard Foster in this book says that in some ways we would prefer, okay, to hear Jesus' call to deny father, mother, brother, houses, land, okay, for the sake of the gospel, than his word to wash each other's feet. Because radical self-denial gives us a feeling of adventure. It gives us, okay, the feeling of being martyrs for God, giving up everything for God, okay? Whereas in service, he says, we experience many little deaths, because in service, okay, it's not always big things, but sometimes it's the small things that matter, okay? And oftentimes that's more of what we're called to do, to serve in those small things, okay? But oftentimes we look more for the big things rather than the small things, okay? So he says we experience many little deaths and go beyond ourselves in the ordinary and mundane things of life. Richard Foster also says, in the discipline of service, there is greater liberty. There is greater liberty because service enables us to say no to the world's games of promotion and authority. And then he uses this term, okay, or this phrase, pecking order. Okay? He says service removes the need for pecking order. What is pecking order? Where does it come from? He's using the analogy of a chicken pen where there is no peace until it's clear who the greatest is among all of the chicken, okay, and who is the least among them, okay? And so, in other words, there is a pecking order. There is a pecking order in a chicken pen. And think of it, okay? Think of it. It's the same at times for us people, okay? Think of any group of people or any organization, and you will find that there is a pecking order. Someone has to be the leader. Someone has to lead, right? Someone has to be the one. But Richard Foster says that the point is not that we do away with all sense of leadership and authority, because even Jesus clearly established the leadership, okay, of the church and the authority of the church. Remember what he said to Peter? He said to Peter in Matthew 16, he said, "Now I say to you, Peter," which means rock, "and upon this rock I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it." Okay? The point is this. Jesus redefined service or leadership. Okay? He defined leadership to servant leadership. Okay? It's not as the world would define leadership. Okay? Often in the world, in corporations, in most organizations, you will find that whoever is on top doesn't serve the ones at the bottom. Okay? It's more of the bottom serving the top. But in the leadership model of Jesus, he turns leadership into servant leadership, where the leader is the one who serves his people. And that's why Jesus said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." In other words, Jesus authority is not found in a position or a title, but in servanthood. It's found in servanthood. Okay? And that's why we need to distinguish between self-righteous service and true service. Because sometimes we think when we're serving, okay, that this is the kind of service that Jesus wants us to do. Okay? And we think that this is the right way to serve. Okay? But there is a difference between self-righteous service and true service. And he gives us, Richard Foster gives us nine differences between self-righteous service and true service. Okay? And the first one he says is this: self-righteous service comes from human effort. Self-righteous service is more concerned about logistics, he says. How, when, where to provide the service. And then if it's not in the plan, forget it. I'm not doing it. Okay? I'm not doing it. Whereas, he says, while true service comes, he says, from a relationship with God. Okay? A relationship with God, because God prompts us to serve when we see a need. It comes from the promptings of the Holy Spirit in each one of us. A true servant sees a need and doesn't just ignore it. He acts on the need. Okay? He acts on the need. The second difference, he says, is that self-righteous service prefers big service. Okay? This is what I was talking about. Because they want to impress people. Okay? And of course, if there's more than a handful of us here right now, then more people are impressed, right? So they want to impress people. They enjoy serving when it's something big. But when it's small, they won't do it. Let someone else do it. Okay? Let someone else do it. But true service, he says, does not distinguish between small and big. Okay? Because true service does not discriminate. It welcomes the opportunity to serve. It welcomes the opportunity to serve. The third difference, he says, is that self-righteous service is focused on external rewards. Okay? It wants to know that people see their service. They want to know that people see their service and appreciate their service. Self-righteous service seeks human applause, while true service, he says, is content with hidden service. They're content with hidden service. No one needs to know, but I will serve. Okay? True service does not seek people's attention because they know, you know why they do it? Because they know they're serving God, not just the people. First and foremost, I'm serving God. That's why I'm doing this. It's not just the people. Okay? That's why I'm serving. The fourth difference, he says, is that self-righteous service is results-oriented. They wait to see people. Self-righteous service waits to see the person they are serving will reciprocate in kind. And they become bitter. This is how you know that you've got self-righteous service, because you become bitter when the results fall below your expectations. Okay? When people aren't appreciative of what you've done for them. But true service, he says, does not measure results. Does not measure these results. It delights in being able to serve. That's why they can serve their enemies as well as their friends. Okay? Because it doesn't matter. The fifth difference, he says that self-righteous service picks and chooses whom to serve. They prefer to serve the high and powerful first rather than the lowly. Remember there was a parable that Jesus gave, a story that Jesus gave where they started serving the rich before the poor. Okay? Self-righteous service is that. You serve the rich and the high and powerful rather than the lowly first. While true service, he says, does not choose whom to serve. Again, true service does not discriminate because they follow the call, the command of Jesus to be a servant to all. Okay? We're called to be a servant to all, not just to the powerful, the high and mighty. Okay? The sixth difference, he says, is that self-righteous service is affected by moods and whims. Meaning, they serve when they feel like serving. Okay? When they feel like serving. While true service, he says, simply serves faithfully. It serves faithfully. They don't allow their feelings and their moods to control their service. Okay? And then seventh, he says, self-righteous service is temporary. They only do it for a time. They only do it for a time. They're afraid to commit to serving long term. While true service, he says, is a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. It has become their pattern of living. Okay? That when they see a need, they act on that need. No one has to push them to do something. They act on the need because it's become part of their life. It's become part of their pattern of living. And that's why when they see a need, they spring into action. They don't turn a blind eye to the need. Eighth difference, he says, is that self-righteous service is insensitive because it insists on doing things their way. It's insensitive to what the person wants. Okay? And sometimes we can be that way. You do it my way, or I'm not doing it. Okay? I'm not doing it. While true service, he says, listens with tenderness and patience before acting. It does not insist on how to do it, but listens to the person's needs. And in fact, they can serve. They can serve by waiting in silence. They don't have to do anything. They can just wait for the person to tell them how they can serve them. The last one, he says, is that self-righteous service divides community because it centers on the glorification of the individual. Okay? Because it's this individual. He raises himself up. Okay? And therefore, it makes the others feel like they owe that individual for serving. They owe him something for serving. Okay? On the other hand, he says, true service builds community. True service builds community because it quietly goes about caring for the needs of others, and attention does not center on one person alone, but the community. And then Richard Foster says, of all the spiritual disciplines, actually, service is the most conducive or the best way to grow in humility. Service is the best way to grow in humility. When you are a CEO in a big company, can come into a community and serve people who are poor or people who are in need, people who are struggling, isn't it true that you have to grow in humility? Okay? You forget about your possession. You forget about what you do because you just want to serve. Especially when we choose to serve others quietly, okay, we grow in humility. Because service disciplines our human desire. What is our human desire? Of course, our human desire is to be recognized, okay? To be honored, to get the attention of others. That's the human desire in each one of us. And nothing disciplines and transforms those desires of the flesh, okay, than service. Than service done quietly. In John's first letter, he says this, okay? For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. Now, when we read that verse, often we tend to think that John's referring to sexual sin, okay? But actually, Richard Foster in his book says the lust of the flesh refers to our failure to discipline our natural human passions. The lust of the eyes, he says, refers to our human tendency to be captivated by outward show. And the pride of life refers to our tendency to be egotistic, okay? To think of ourselves only. In each of these cases, the same thing is in operation when you think of it, okay? It's our dependence on our human abilities take away God, with no dependence on God. That's how I would look at it, okay? All of those three things. Because it's all to do with our human abilities, okay? Our human abilities. Richard Foster then says, the daily discipline of service is the best way to keep these passions in check. And the result of our daily discipline of the flesh will bring us the grace of humility. Now, of course, there are natural and understandable reasons or hesitancy in serving. Okay? Because, let's be honest, we fear people will take advantage of us and people will walk all over us. Okay? But that's why we need to understand the difference between choosing to serve versus choosing to be a servant. Choosing to serve or choosing to be a servant. Because choosing to serve, okay, means that you're still in charge, isn't it? You're still in charge. I chose to serve, I'm in charge, okay? We decide whom we will serve and when we will serve. And that's why we worry about people stepping on us and taking advantage of us. But choosing to be a servant means we give up the right to be in charge. We voluntarily choose, okay, to be taken advantage of in a way. So we cannot be manipulated because we've surrendered the right to decide who and where to serve. Who and where to serve. We become available and vulnerable. And there is great freedom in that when you think of it. Think of what it's like to be a slave. Okay? I know we don't have slaves any longer today, okay? But think of what it's like to be a slave, okay? We did not have slaves in the Philippines. Growing up, I know we had servants, okay? But when I look at it at times, I think to myself, they're almost like slaves, okay? They're almost like slaves. A slave sees life from the viewpoint of slavery, isn't it? He does not see himself as having the same rights of someone who is free. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong, okay? I'm not saying that we are to see ourselves this way, okay? Because slavery that's involuntary is cruel and dehumanizing, okay? And it's wrong. But when I talk about being a slave, I'm talking about slavery that's freely chosen, okay? Freely chosen. Because when it's really chosen, then everything changes, isn't it? Voluntary service brings great joy. It brings great joy. That's why Paul boasted, okay? Even Paul used that word slave to describe himself, okay? He said he boasted about being a slave in 1 Corinthians 9, 19 to 23, he says, though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone. A slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law. So to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, I am under Christ's law. So as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessing. So what is Paul saying? I become what those people are around me, okay, so that I can win them to Christ. So the fear that we will be taken advantage and stepped on is a valid fear, okay? And yes, it can happen. But who can hurt someone who has freely chosen to be stepped on? Think about it, right? But again, let me clarify, that's not a license to abuse people or to allow others to abuse you, okay? Abusive behavior can never be justified, okay? Can never be justified. I'm talking here about a mindset, okay? A mindset of serving others. The mindset of a slave is, I will do everything I can to bring this person to Christ. I will do everything to serve my brothers and sisters the way Jesus served his disciples, his apostles, his followers, okay? Service is not a list of things to do. Service is a way of living. Okay? It's a way of living. And that's why sometimes we struggle when we're asked to serve, because it hasn't become our way of living. We're so used to being served rather than to serve. Okay? But when you're used to serving, okay, it's much, much more easier because it's part of your life. And I think I would honor the parents who are here, because you've known, okay, you've known how it feels like, isn't it? Because sometimes you feel like you're a slave to your children, okay? They come to you not only for money, they come to you for almost anything, okay? And they could already be in their 18 years old, 20 years old, and even sometimes they're already 30 years old, and they're still coming to you and saying to you, Mom, I don't have any money, can you lend me some money, right? And you, of course, you just say, oh, I love him, I have this radical love, though I don't like what he's doing. You give him the money. You give him the money, right? You see, doing specific acts of service is not the same as living in the discipline of service, okay? It's not just about doing, okay? Doing things, not a list of things to do. It's a way of living. And that's the challenge for each one of us, to make it as part of our way of life, okay? To serve others. It's one thing, you see, it's one thing to act like a servant versus being a servant. Okay? Let's go back to the story of Jesus at the final meal, okay? So this is the night before he's about to give his life. He looks around the room, he sees proud hearts, disciples arguing, okay, about who's the greatest, and he shows them who is the greatest by putting on a slave's apron, picking up a bucket, fills it with water, and he starts to take their feet and wash their feet. So when he does this, of course, everybody's gasping and they're saying, oh, no. In fact, Peter says, no way, you're going to wash my feet, okay? Because it's almost like, think about it this way, okay? The Prime Minister comes to your home, and then he says, may I wash your feet? Now you're dreaming, okay? Obviously, I'm dreaming he's going to do that. But it's worse than that, okay? Because you need to understand, in this case, in Jesus' case, who's offering them to wash their feet, okay? This is not just a prime minister. This is not just a president. This is not just a CEO of a multinational organization. We're talking about Jesus, the Son of God, the Lamb of God, the Prince of Peace, the living water, the bread of life. He's our Redeemer, our righteousness, our light of the world, okay? The Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He stoops down and he does something that is reserved for the lowest of the low in society. Jesus, it says, loved them to the end by doing something that everyone else thought was too low for them to do. Jesus loved them with radical love. The greatest is the one who will be your servant. That's why Jesus, the Son of God, knelt down and washed their feet. But sometimes, you see, we can have this attitude, I'm not doing that. I'm too important for that. That's beneath me, or I'm too busy for that. And that's why today I challenge you, okay, that whenever you see a need, when you see a need that you can do something about, ask yourself this question, okay? Or ask God this question. God, is this an assignment that you want me to do? Is this an assignment that you want me to do? Do you want me to help this person, okay? And sometimes it's so obvious, the answer is so obvious already, okay? I dare you, every morning when you wake up, you say, God, give me the eyes to see the needs that I would otherwise overlook. Give me the ears to hear those who are hurting. Give me a heart to care. God, if there is a need that I can meet, cause me to pause and stop and say, God, is this an assignment that you are giving me? Let's keep in mind what St. Paul said in Romans 12:2. He says, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good and pleasing and perfect will. Paul says there's a problem with our world, okay? He's saying there's a problem in this world. God loves the world. The problem is not the world, okay? Because God himself loves the world, okay? That's why he gave his only son. But Paul is saying the problem with the world is the pattern of this world. The pattern of this world. It's how it thinks, it's how it speaks, it's what it's chasing after, okay? The problem is the pattern of this world. And the pattern of this world is, I don't want to serve, okay? If you pay me something, maybe I'll do it, okay? But I won't serve for nothing, okay? I won't serve for nothing because we give other excuses, as I said earlier, because I'm too busy, or I don't even care, really. Okay? Don't even care for that person. So, break the pattern, okay? Break the pattern. How? Make a commitment to serve. Make a commitment to serve. Because commitment will form your character. Commitment will form your character, and actually commitment reveals what you truly value. It reveals not only what you believe in, but what you really value in life. And our commitment shapes our character, and it determines our destiny. Now I ask you to stand up. And let me end by saying this. Your decision to be committed to serve will carry a price, okay? I'm warning you now. It will carry a price, okay? Because every commitment carries a price. Every commitment you make carries a consequence. There's consequences, okay? And the consequence could be that you need to give up some things. That's the reality. Sometimes we need to give up some things so that we can be committed. If you're committed to Christ and His work, it will carry a price tag, okay? There is a price tag. And Jesus Himself told us about it, okay? He told His listeners about it. He says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father, mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Let me paraphrase it another way. Jesus is saying, if you want to be my follower, you must love me more than your father, your own father, mother, wife, children, brothers and sisters, yes, even your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. Today, Jesus is calling you to radical love for those who are in need. Amen? Let's just sing this song and then I'll pray for you.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And oh,